Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Reforged podcast. My name is Drew and it's a pleasure to be speaking with you. Thanks for tuning into today's episode. I am back in my hometown on summer break. Finished my first year of college. It went really well, so I appreciate all my friends and family that were praying for me during that time, and I'm really grateful to God and all the great work that He's done in me and through me during my time at college so far. I've met a lot of great people. I've developed a lot of great friendships and relationships with faculty and staff at the school, with my classmates, my peers. It's been really, really great, and I'm so thankful for that time. And I'm looking forward to going back next semester and starting to get some more courses, especially related to my major. If you don't know, I want to be an electrical engineer, particularly in the computer electrical side of things. I'd love to go into circuit design, making motherboards and PCBs and devices for computers and phones and other electronics. I'd really like to get into that industry, and so I'm looking forward to having some opportunities to actually take some more circuits-based classes and have different labs and get to do some more cool hands-on stuff. So I appreciate some prayers during the summer for me that I use my time wisely here. I do have a couple opportunities to work and make some money over the summer, which would be good for saving up for future college-related expenses and paying off loans afterwards. But I appreciate some prayers as I'm looking for a couple other opportunities. And so prayers that the Lord would make those opportunities available to me, make me aware of them, and guide me to them, and just that He would provide that opportunity to work and to get some good savings in during the summer. Also, being able to spend time with family and friends back home that I haven't had a chance to see in a while has been really good, and I pray that He continues to bless that time and also obviously opportunities to dedicate more time to this show and to the podcast. Having more free time available is really good. So um, I'll see how it goes, but I'm gonna try to probably shift back onto like a weekly schedule, um, just with the extra time during summer, and I hope that ends up working out. So I'd really appreciate prayers for that. I'd also appreciate too um, if you guys could be praying. I have a friend who's unfortunately going through some really hard stuff medically right now. He's been in and out in the hospital for the past couple weeks, and it's been really, really difficult, really challenging for him and for his family. Um, they're not quite exactly sure uh, what's causing the sickness, but he's been in a lot of pain, a lot of discomfort, and they're starting to work out some more definite answers and possible treatment options. So I'm hoping and praying that soon he will get some relief from that, and that they'll be able to figure out what's going on, and hopefully give him some treatment so that he can experience some comfort and healing in that. But just prayers that the presence of the Lord would continue to be felt powerfully by him, by his family, and that they would be able to rely on him to sustain them, and also that he would bring about healing and clarity to this sickness very soon, because he has been dealing with it for a while, and it's definitely starting to wear thin on him. And so I would appreciate if you guys could be praying for him as well. That'd be great. If you guys have any prayer requests of your own, please feel free to leave them in the comment section of either the YouTube show or the show on Spotify, whatever platform you're choosing to listen on. And I'll be sure to be praying for those things for you. Today, I actually want to start a new mini series. Something I've always been very passionate about is apologetics. I find it very spiritually filling to consider apologetics and logical arguments for God and His existence and justification as to why I follow Him. I think that there's a lot of deep spiritual depth to the faith of an individual that's really hard to explain in rational terms. It's something that has to be experienced. But I think undoubtedly, too, God has made himself very well known through his creation, through the world we live in. And his character is very observable at work. And so I've always loved considering the logical arguments and looking at proof of the existence of God and the evidence for God. And so I want to do a little mini series on three major arguments from God. Now, I'm no apologetic or theological expert. A lot of what I'm going to be talking about is stuff that I've heard from other people who are experts, a lot more qualified than me, a lot smarter than I am. Um, Particularly, as I mentioned probably several times on this show, I'm very inspired by Dr. Frank Turek. He's a apologist. He's written several different books. Most prominently, he has a book called "I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist," which goes over a lot of logical evidence that there is a God, and then he works through the arguments to get to the point where you actually come to the Christian God, and why you should believe in God the Father and God the Son and the Holy Spirit for logical reasons. And that's been very inspiring to me. And I love listening to his podcast and the guests that he has on talk about things like that. Um, and I've listened to a lot of other, apologists talk too, um, different YouTube clips and episodes I've seen. And again, it's always been very impactful to me. And so this series is inspired by them, and I'm going to be pulling a lot of things that they've talked about. Um, this first episode, right, we're going to look at three different arguments for God. We're going to be looking at three logical arguments. We're looking at the cosmological argument today, or the argument of creation. The creation of the universe points to the existence of God, and we'll get into exactly how that is. Um, I'm going to put in a couple different notes and sources of things that I've heard before and Googled and looked up. Um, but the breakdown, the three-part kind of summary that I'm going to go through this argument, um, I found that on the website of Natasha Crane, who's um, another apologist, author. She does a lot of stuff with the organization that Frank Turek runs, so it kind of makes sense that they would be in line with that. But credit where credit's due. That's where I found a breakdown, which I modify and change some things about, added some additional stuff. But that foundation comes from her website. And I can put a link to that in the description. Um, but let's just get right into it. So the first thing I want to do, as I said, is go through what are like the foundational components of the cosmological or the creation argument. And it's basically three logical steps through that argument to get to the conclusion of God. The first is that the universe has a beginning. So we're going to look at evidence to prove that the universe does, in fact, have a beginning. It started at some point in time. It has a definite beginning. Um, the second part would be that which has a beginning must be caused by something. If it has a beginning, it must be an effect of an external cause. And so we'll look at, again, different signs of evidence of that. Um, and then the final claim is that the cause of the beginning of the universe must be independent of the universe, and all of the qualities that this cause must have is definable as God. Not necessarily the God of the Bible, not necessarily a Christian God. We'll get more into that later on, but at the very least, the existence of some idea of God, a higher being, and we'll get into what exactly that implies, what that means. And so, I do want to say we're not necessarily in this episode looking at proof of the existence of the Christian God, but we are looking at this argument, which is a fundamental step in getting to the conclusion that there is a God, and then working that way eventually into the existence of and the proof of our Christian God. So certainly be interesting. Just hang in with me there, and we'll get started with that first claim that the universe has a beginning. So obviously, if you do look at the biblical perspective, if you look from a Christian perspective, if you look at the first two books of Genesis, the accounts of the world's creation, there's debate on how literal it is and how mythological interpretive it is, and not want to get too much in the weeds with that, but something that is fundamentally true, and the most important claim from Genesis 1 and 2 um, comes actually in the first the first verse of Genesis 1, which is, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." So God created the heavens, the earth, and everything in it. So we believe as Christians that our Christian God is the one who created. We believe that He is the one only true God, God the Father, Jesus the Son, and the Holy Spirit. That it was that God that created the world as we know it, created the heavens, which we have not yet experienced. Um, and we believe too that they created everything in it, that God is responsible for the existence of nature and land and sea, not just creating the earth, but forming the earth. We believe that He's responsible for creating us as well, and that we're made in His image and we're loved by Him. Um, if we disconnect from the Bible for a second and look at things scientifically, as the world would say, now, of course, we know, and I think we've even talked about recently, science goes hand in hand with religion and with faith. Um, when we do science, we're observing the world that God created to further understand His creation, further understand who He is. We should not separate the two. But a lot of people do separate the two, and it's important when we're having logical arguments to look at things from agreed upon standards and metrics. We have to address things that obviously people are contentious on, and we have to, argue things. There's debate involved, but there is also, of course, an importance in meeting people where they are and arguing on their terms, taking the battle to their home, as you might say, I guess, um, and kind of coming down to their level. Um, and so, if you want to separate science from religion, there's a lot of scientific evidence, and most everyone has a scientific consensus and belief that the universe did, in fact, have a beginning. Few people argue that the universe has been eternally there forever. Um, there's a couple core components of that I want to look at. One would be a major scientific discovery that we had as a result of the Hubble telescope. The Hubble telescope, put up in the early 1900s, about we were able to see a lot of cool stuff, a lot of far away space, and observe it. And one thing that we noticed is that the universe appears to be expanding outwards from us. So we seem, regardless of if they're the center of the universe or not, we look at the galaxies and what's out there, and it seems to be expanding outwards because it's moving, it's shifting away from our point of view. And so that movement, that outward expansion, suggests that the universe is growing and expanding outward. And that actually would make sense too, for a reason I'll get into in a second. And again, I'm not going to explain it nearly professionally or scientifically as an actual physicist were, but something with the laws of physics kind of goes into this. Um, and so, but anyway, the expansion of the universe outward from us that we were able to observe from the Hubble telescope, scientists were able to determine, this also implies that there's a starting point of the universe. If it's expanding outward from a point, that it implies that it started from a point too. It's kind of like I came up with this idea, this metaphor, right? This is what came to my mind. If you drop a stone in water, obviously the water kind of ripples outward. So if you take that starting point, that impulse at the beginning of the universe, you can see it ripple effect outward. And that's what we're observing with our universe. We're observing that the universe itself is actually expanding outwards from an initial point, which is the beginning of the universe. We also have observed, in space, something called cosmic microwave background, or as they just abbreviate, CMB. What that basically is radiation that scientists think is left over from the Big Bang. Now, I know that that can be a point of contention among believers, the whole Big Bang thing, because a lot of times people do reference the Big Bang as the start of the universe, but they don't attribute God to it. I and many others actually do believe that the Big Bang is probably how the universe began. um, it seems to be logically sound, and at least to the best of our understanding, something that happened. I don't think that I need to know exactly how the universe started. So I'm not too worried about my accuracy on that. But I think, given all of the research and science involved, I think that the Big Bang, this giant explosion, is very plausible. The difference is a lot of people just again say the Big Bang happened and that was some without cause. It's just a coincidental event that happened for no reason. And I instead would, and many other Christians would believe, no, actually, the Big Bang is how the universe started, but that was an action taken by God. That's just how God started the universe. That's how He chose to do it. Also, understanding He didn't have to do it that way, but that's the natural process that he created and started that resulted in our universe being born. Um, and so, as Dr. Frank Turek often says, and I like to say too, I do believe in the Big Bang. I just know the God that made it bang. And so, um, but I digress. The thing about the Big Bang that's important to understand is based off our understanding, the universe began as this dense ball of energy, extremely dense, like to an extent like we can't understand, like denser than black holes are, and just all this energy, and that there was a lot of heat energy, and then when the universe started, it sort of just started very harshly, very intensely expanding outward, and as a result, as the universe started expanding, it started cooling. So it was taking that heat energy and using it to expand outwards into motion, right? And that's like you look at like the laws of motion and physics and a lot of stuff like that. And you should understand that this would make a lot of sense because if the universe is expanding outward uh, and it's cooling, the energy that was heat that was keeping it condensed and dense together and had a lot of heat energy, now that heat energy is pushing out and so it's spreading out, expanding the universe. Excuse me. Um, and so what the CMB is, the cosmic microwave background, is it's observable leftover remnant radiation or heat from the Big Bang. And it's this faint, and you can observe it with different technologies. It's like these faint light waves that's left over from it's like the initial energy release. It's what's left over from the start of the Big Bang. Again, very rough explanation. I'm sure you could look into it online, find a lot of great sources that explain it a lot better than I do. But just that's an interesting thing to note is we have this theory of the Big Bang and we have evidence towards that theory. And something else too is that again, if this really proves the Big Bang, that also like would very easily give that starting point, that beginning to the universe that we're talking about, is that initial concentration of the universe that was created, we believe by God. Um, some believe just coincidentally that resulted in the creation of our universe, but that would be the beginning point undoubtedly. And as I mentioned before, there is a scientific consensus. Atheists and believers alike both believe that there is some beginning to the universe. You'd be hard pressed to find someone who doesn't believe that the universe started at some point. You can get into debates on why it started and if there's a cause, and the contention often comes in what exactly caused the universe to begin. Some people believe that it is a causational event itself, that it was caused by itself, I guess, that didn't have a cause or a creator. But many, like myself and other believers, and even believers in other religions, um, believe that it was created. So that's some interesting stuff there. Moving into the second point, though, if we believe that the universe has a beginning, as many do, and as there's evidence for, um, we also believe that actions that have beginnings in our observable universe are typically of cause and effect. There's a broad consensus on this for everything except for some reason the creation of the universe itself. For example, if a vase falls off the table, that's an action effect. It'd be really weird if all of a sudden, if you have a vase firmly planted on a table, if all of a sudden for no apparent reason the vase just falls off the table, that would that would defy conservation of energy and the laws of physics. I mean, this vase just fell of its own accord off the table. It had to move, it had to fall off, and there was no source of that initial energy, nothing causing that. Like, how did that happen? But if we look and say, well, our universe, the actions that occur in it, the effects are always causational. We say, oh, it makes sense that the vase fell off the table because our cat pushed it. The cat came over and knocked it off the table. The cat caused the vase to fall. That makes sense. And something really interesting, I think, about that analogy is that this is one example of some case where we see actually there's an effect, and the cause comes from a higher being or a being with more agency at the very least. Being with more agency, a higher being is what actually causes the effect. So in this case, The cat has more agency than the vase does. The vase is an inanimate object. It does not choose what happens to it. It has no level of consciousness. The cat, on the other hand, while it may not have the same level of consciousness as a human being, well, certainly does not have the same level of consciousness as a human being, um, does actually make the choice consciously to knock the vase off the table. Now, the cat may not, again, understand the implications of that as humans are capable of doing, but the cat made an action. The vase cannot act, but the cat can. The cat acted in a way that pushed the vase off the table. And so, why it's hard to understand that the universe has a cause that's higher above itself, a cause that's capable of choosing to create the universe, of making the choice to cause the action, um, even if the action or the effect rather doesn't have its own agency. It doesn't make sense to say that doesn't make sense because we observe it in the world around us all the time. Um, the claim that the universe has no cause is fairly illogical to me because we already saw there are signs of the beginning of the universe rooted in some event, right? We're calling the Big Bang, right? So something happened that resulted in the creation of our universe, right? So already we know that the beginning of our universe was caused by an event. And to say that that event is completely arbitrary is confusing. And to say it wasn't caused is confusing because the event both set forth principles that operate our universe today, right? Like we can observe, like, oh, the Big Bang, if we want to call it that, or whatever you might believe, right? The start of the universe caused all of these signs, the CMB and the expansion of the universe and all these things we can observe, right? It created those rules, but it's also defined by those rules. Like the Big Bang created a universe which has physical laws of nature that are constant that we can observe, and yet it was also like it happened under those laws. To suggest that something created principles and law in nature, this event, but also is operating under those same principles and laws suggests like, okay, these principles and laws must come from somewhere. Like if we're saying that the Big Bang event it agrees with, it follows conservation of energy, or like saying like, okay, so if you have a lot of energy and then you're decreasing the energy, you can't actually get rid of energy, it has to go somewhere, and so that's why it's expanding, like enthalpy and entropy, right? You've got heat's decreasing, but the motion, the disorder, the expansion is increasing. um, to say that, okay, so the Big Bang operated under those principles, but also created the universe in which those principles are true. So where do those principles come from? How come the Big Bang event was, we'll say, for lack of a better word, obedient to those principles that it allegedly also created? That doesn't really make any sense. I don't believe that the Big Bang is simply some random event. I think that, and we'll see later as we go into our second argument in the next episode, which would be like the design argument or the fine tuning of the universe. It's evident that the universe, by design, has some kind of creator, because everything is too perfect. It works too well, and if any microscopic change was made, it would throw everything off balance. So we'll get to that later, but the creation of the universe itself seems to suggest that there's something at least that caused it in a certain way and had it caused under certain conditions. And that's where we'll get into the third point here, which is actually leading into the existence of God, because we believe, right, there's that the universe had a beginning, and then we believe too that because it has a beginning, it must have a cause. In this case, the cause of the universe is the creator of the universe as well. And this creator must come from outside its own creation, right? You can't say that the cause of the universe is of the universe because the universe at some point did not exist because it had a beginning. So the creator of the universe must be from outside that universe and creating it. There's another again, famous apologist, done a lot of work in this, Dr. William Lane Craig. And he's got a couple points, traits, if you will, of the God that is proven from the creation of the universe and the qualities that he must have. Um, and if you look at these qualities, it'll paint a pretty good picture of our God, actually, but just a God in general, right? So I'll go through those. The first point that he mentions is that the God of the universe, the creator of the universe, the cause of the universe, must be personal. It must be relational because it had to choose to create. This cause had to make the choice to start and begin the universe. The universe, again, at one point did not exist, but this cause always did. So it had to make the choice. We don't always understand why that is. We don't have to look at that now, but we have to at least be able to see and agree that this cause chose to create. Because if it didn't, the creation would not be there. We also know that the cause of the creation of the universe must be uncaused and beginningless, because this cause created the beginning. And, to make it less confusing, I'm just going to refer to the cause as God, but we'll see that that gets proved through going through these causes. But God created the very beginning of the universe, comes from before the beginning of the universe. So it doesn't make sense that God would have a beginning because the God created the very idea of the beginning, the very existence of beginning. We know that the God must be changeless, unchanging, because creation continues to operate on these fundamental principles which reflect an unchanging nature. The laws of physics stay constant, they don't change. The natural world has a natural order that sustains itself. Of course, there's a lot of trouble in our world, but that comes from us as people making bad decisions and going against God's design. But the natural world itself is consistent and unchanging, and that reflects God's character. God must be immaterial because he cannot be made of material because he made and created the material world. So he has to come from outside of that. Wouldn't make sense. God also is timeless, again, for the same reason. God created the beginning of time, and so he must be outside of time, not subject to time, because he's the creator of time. Wouldn't make sense for God to be restrained by something that he created. God must be spaceless because same reason, he created space and time and material, so he must be outside of all those things. And these last two are pretty self-explanatory. He must be extremely powerful and intelligent. I think those are kind of, again, self-explanatory, but God created the entire universe and all of its processes out of nothing. That demonstrates an intense intelligence, because we as humans have trouble planning our own week, let alone the entire creation of the universe, and creating it in such a miraculously stable and in precise way. Again, demonstrates extreme intelligence and also extreme power to create that out of nothing. And so, two main points I want to look at with that that you might have noticed in these qualities is the first is that in many cases, God is whatever his creation isn't. And that's not to say that the good qualities of his creation don't represent God, but I'm saying you notice a lot of things like God is immaterial, God is timeless, God is spaceless, God is uncaused, right? That contrasts his creation, which his creation was caused. It did have a beginning. His creation has material. His creation has time. His creation has space. God's creation has these constraints on it that point to the fact that they were created by someone who did not have these constraints on him. And God does not have. And God logically cannot have these constraints on him, because to say that God is the cause of the universe's beginning, we have to assume that God does not have any of the constraints that the universe itself has on it, because, again, the creator created the universe. So the creator cannot be of the universe. The creator cannot be of the laws and processes of the universe, because the creator is the one who created them. The creator originates outside. The creator, in fact, has no exact origin, because creating the idea of a beginning, creating the idea of time and space, our human conception of what origin is and means, that those simply does not define, it's simply not a restraint of God. And the second thing is, in the case of things that are good, God's character is demonstrated through creation. So the fact that God's creation is unchanging, it's very relatable to the fact that He is unchanging. That's how we observe that. The physical laws that maintain the universe point to the creator and sustainer who made a perfect creation. The fact that it does sustain itself and doesn't change, doesn't need to change because it's perfect the way He made it the first time, points to His perfection and His unchangingness. Powerful things that we see in nature, the fact that creation is such a immense thing, the fact that our human brain can hardly comprehend our own planet, let alone our solar system, let alone our galaxy, let alone space and the expansion of the universe. We constantly, and we look to the stars, see things that absolutely blow our minds. And that's the same way God is, because God is, it's impossible for us to fully comprehend who He is. It's possible for us by His design to comprehend enough of who He is, to know Him enough that we can accept His love for us and choose to love Him in return. But there are things that we simply cannot comprehend about God, which suggests that He's above us. And since we are the highest order beings on this planet, that points to God being, again, how much more higher than that. And so, yeah, and going back to that too, God created us, as we believe in the Christian Bible. We were created in His image, and so our ability to create things and our intelligence and creativity, the power that we have, again, much more limited than God's is, but it reflects that same power, intelligence, creativity that God has. And so, in that way, He's known through His creation. And so, we have to determine that if the universe has a beginning and end, which we looked at a bunch of scientific reasons why that is the case, we should also believe that because it has a beginning, it must also have a cause or a creator, which again, we looked at a lot of reasons why that's the case. That cause has to be God, because it has to be a being that is unrestrained by this whole list of things that we provided. And that sounds a lot like our conception of who God is. And so, again, this does not necessarily point to the true God, the Christian God of the Bible, but it does prove that there is a God, and that's an important step for proving that there is the God, is to start by, okay, at least theism is correct. I listened to a podcast recently too, again by Dr. Frank Turek, and something he was talking about was how you don't have to prove or disprove everything that you come across. You just have to figure out how much of it you do have to prove or disprove to either write it off or look further. And so we've proved logically with this argument that theism has to be true. It's the only thing that makes logical sense. And so that instantly writes off atheism. We don't have to consider atheism for, well, what's true and what's false about atheism, because there's one glaring issue that makes atheism false. And so we can write that off. And anything that could be true about atheism, we can trust too that we would find those same things everywhere. Like a lot of atheists, they don't believe in an objective source of morality, but they believe in objective morality to some extent. Some don't, some do. And we don't have to worry about things like that, because the Bible provides an answer later to objective morality, and we can trust that that's the case. So, again, didn't exactly prove the existence of the Christian God, but proving the existence of a God, or the logical reality of theism, is a step to approaching the true Christian God. Because now we know, okay, there is a God, so which God is it? Who is God? And that's an important thing to be able to do if we're going to walk in faith, is to figure out who is the God that we serve. And I hope that as we continue through this, and then we'll kind of find more evidence for there being this God, and we'll come to the realization that, okay, it is the Christian God. And I hope and pray that it's really going to deepen your understanding of your faith and deepen your relationship with God and with Christ and with the Spirit. So thank you so much for listening today. Thank you for listening to an amateur like me talk about this kind of stuff that interests me. I'm sure that there's many things, again, that could be said much better by people more qualified than me. So please check out people like Dr. Frank Turek, like uh, Dr. Natasha Crane. Please look at people like Dr. William Lane Craig, like all these people that do a lot of great stuff. Really digging in, doing research, writing books, and having discussions and debates on these topics. A lot of great stuff on YouTube. Check out like the Cross Examine page on YouTube, or they have a website too. They've got a lot of different studies and books and great stuff, great resources. And I'm sure if you just like Google anything about like apologetics, or like search on YouTube anything about apologetics and arguments for God, you'll see a lot of great stuff. It's also Dr. John Lennox. He's great. I've seen a couple of his things. Yeah, I mean, evangelism is a really powerful and personal thing, and it's definitely important. Um, but I also find a lot of appeal to looking at it from a more apologetic and logical standpoint, proving to people, or at least stirring up in their mind, because I think we live in an age where so many people are so detached from their soul, and that's a really scary and hard thing to say. But I think people are just detached from their soul, where trying to make an appeal to their passions and soul, uh, it can work, but it doesn't always have the impact that you would hope or think it would. And I think that's because people just simply they already have the assumptions that they cannot believe, and that they do not believe in the existence of God, or in the existence of a higher power, um, and their worldview discourages them from even considering something like that. They don't want to see miracles. They don't want to see God. It is very sad. I've seen many people ask the question, "Hey, if Christianity were true, would you believe it?" And the answer, unfortunately, for a lot of people is no. And that's where a lot of prayer is needed, because there's a lot of spiritual warfare there, and God's really needed there. It's only Him who can work in those ways, and by His grace, He apportions us to help with that. Um, but I also think that there's so many who've just simply never considered the Christian worldview, and I think that apologetics can be really powerful, because you may find someone who's not just indifferent to your beliefs of Christianity, who not just doesn't agree with them, but who actually actively disagrees with them. There's a lot of people who are apathetic, unfortunately, but there's also a lot of people who have false ideas, and I think both people can be reached by apologetics, because apologetics can help people to logically, who don't really think about this or care that much, to logically realize, oh, the way that the world works, God must exist. And if God exists, I need to find him. I need to serve him, because that's my highest purpose in life. And then for the people who disagree, showing them the flaws and the holes in the way that they think, and the way that they have borrowed precepts that logically result in what you'd have to come to the conclusion, the existence of God, but yet they still ignore the conclusion, and they look at the evidence, but they don't have the conclusion that is clear in the evidence. So um, that would definitely, I think, really be impactful if more of us as believers started trying to reason that way. And we looked in those resources ourselves to deepen our own faith and understanding, our own trust and hope in God, um, and also be sharing that with others, so that we can, again, um, fight spiritual warfare on God's side in a different way, on a different battlefield. You need soldiers on both. So I hope that you are praying and considering what we talked about today, and that it's, again, impactful to your own faith and belief, and give you some stuff to think about, some more stuff to look into and research, but also that um, it's really inspiring you how you evangelize to others in powerful ways. So thank you guys so much for listening. If you liked and enjoyed today's episode, please share the show with your friends, families, coworkers, anyone that you know that might benefit from seeing it. You can share this episode, or a link to just the page on YouTube or Spotify in general if you want to share the content more broadly. That's where you can find us. I hope and pray that you found this beneficial, and that they will as well. So thank you so much for listening to me today. Continue to be praying for my good friend, if you would, so please. And also, if you have, again, any prayer requests of your own, please leave those for me. I'll be happy to be praying about those as well. But thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed. I hope it was impactful and God spoke to you in powerful ways. Have a great rest of your week, and remember, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another.